We're now looking at part of Thomas's Summa, the first part of the second part. That's what this Prima Secunda means, where he is once again exploring love, but he's doing it in terms of what we call a passion. Before we looked at love in God and love in the angels, and we saw that Thomas can't, stay completely on point, and he talks a lot about human beings and the way love works for them in order to make sense of that. This is going to be all about human beings. So this, you might think, is a bit more practical for you. And he's exploring these questions about, what is love, and how does it work, and are there different kinds of love. You notice that he's going to be bringing in a couple terms that we've had already, like friendship. Friendship gets kind of sucked into love, and we'll see why. And he's bringing in another term, which I just want to alert you to, because I'm not going to talk that much about it in this session, but next session we'll be talking about it a lot, and that's charity. This is a term, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but this is a term that means something different in philosophy and theology than it does in our ordinary life. We've narrowed it to mean sort of like just giving money to institutions, or to people on the street, or perhaps to your neighbor. And that is one meaning of charity. But charity means love. So, if you're giving money to the bum on the street because you actually care about whether he's cold, hungry, well-clothed, that sort of thing, you're doing that out of love, and giving alms would be an expression of a more perfect kind of love, which is what charity is. Charity is a virtue for Thomas. We're not quite ready to get into that yet. So let's talk about this term passion. When I say the word passion, what comes to mind for you? Yeah?
Like a really strong feeling, like a very sure feeling about something.
Okay, yeah, that's sure or strong, or another word we might use for that would be intense, right? And what's another word that we can substitute for feeling?
Usually with feeling.
What's that?
I was going to say, passion I usually associate with, a physical sort of attraction as opposed to,
Okay.
Desire.
Desire? Yeah, I think you're right. Often these can go hand in hand, right? A passionate lover is somebody who's very, very attached to the person with whom they're in love, or lusting after, or whatever, and that can be a very strong desire. What's another word we use for feeling? Yeah.
Oh, no, I wasn't good. I was just.
Well, go ahead and add what you're going to add.
Like dedication.
Interesting. Yeah. We talk about this in terms of somebody's passion being bringing wells to rural areas of Africa, or doing the Teach for America, or it might be about a hobby too. They are a passionate model train diorama producer, right, or a passionate home brewer or something like that. We often do mean not just that they have desire, but this is where they invest themselves. This is where they develop their capacities. Thomas has in mind some of this. Desire will actually be one of the passions. Feelings or emotions, those are within the realm of what Thomas calls the passions. They don't always necessarily need to be super strong or intense. It's interesting that in our time we use the word passionate to describe those. We reserve the word passion for very intense feelings of love, joy, anger, In Thomas's time it was a bit broader, and so it covered all of what they call the passions of the soul. So all the things that you think of as your emotions are passions. There's one other thing that goes along with this, though, that sometimes gets left out. It does fit in with some of the things that he's talking about here. You can talk about the object of a passion. So the object of my love, for example, or the object of joy, why it is that I'm happy, the object of my sadness, what it is that I'm sad over. the object of my anger, the person who my anger is directed towards, the person who I'm angry with. There's also the subject, the person who is actually feeling the emotion, the passion, who is... Now here's where it gets interesting. Passion is something that we suffer, we undergo. That's why he uses the term patient. And he's not using it in the sense of like being patient with somebody. And he doesn't mean just in the medical sense of like, you know, you go to the doctor, you're the patient. It's sort of a relational term. Think about what a patient actually goes through in the doctor's office. Is the patient calling the shots? Not usually. I mean, maybe they go in and they order the doctor around, but that's pretty rare. What happens instead? You go into the doctor's office, what's your checkup like? What do they check you for? Like if you have to...
Your blood pressure?
Yeah, so usually that's not the doctor, that's the nurse. And the nurse comes in and he or she says, roll up your sleeve, you know, and they put this thing on your arm, or sometimes they put you into a machine and it swells up, and you're stuck there. They don't say, would you like to have your blood pressure taken? You're going to have your blood pressure taken now. And then what happens? Bless you. They leave, you sit around on that butcher paper, whatever that wax paper is, for a little while. Doctor comes in, he's usually got like a clipboard, or she's got a clipboard and a stethoscope and a white coat. Now what do?
Ask questions.
Yeah, and you don't get to say, I'd rather not answer that question. Because you're there to supply them with the information. It's for your own good. What else? Are they content with just asking questions? I see. Write something down. Take off.
Check your hearing.
Yeah, they like put things in your ears and open your mouth. Open it wider. They get the tongue depressor. Get that tongue out of the way so I can see what's going on down there. They're acting upon you. You are the patient. They are acting upon you. Now, why did I bring all this up? When we have an emotion, one way of understanding emotions is that things are acting upon us and we are responding. That's why we talk about an emotional response. What's interesting to think about is what's actually in us that's responding. What is the patient in that case? With the doctor, it's real easy. You're the patient. You do the things. When you see something beautiful and it inspires you with awe, what inside of you is actually responding to that? That's what Thomas is going to get to. He's not going to talk about awe, but he's going to talk about love. So love is a passion, and it's, other things as well. But this is one main way to understand it. Remember the Thomistic anthropology that we went through last time, where we have, intellect and reason, and that's an important part of you. Every one of you has a rational mind. That's what makes you a human being. It's not just the look, having two eyes and ears and stuff like that, because, we could make a robot that looks like that. You have a rational mind, and then you have what Thomas calls sensitive appetites. And you have that intellectual or rational appetite that we call the will. And these sensitive appetites are broken into a irascible power or part and a concupiscible power or part. And it's not that important that you actually remember those terms, because unless you're going to, be engaged in Thomas Aquinas scholarship, there's not many people who talk in those terms these days. Bless you. Think of it this way. You have, within what we call the sensitive appetite, this realm of desires inside of you, you have a part of you that is just sort of straight out, basically desirous, that wants things, that feels attracted to things. It also feels repulsed by things. Then you have a part of you that when you're challenged or when things start to go south and there's something to be protected or something to be achieved, that pushes, that exerts itself. That's the irascible part. It's named after anger, ira. And if you think about what anger is, when you get angry, sometimes you're just angry because you're out of sorts and you're physically uncomfortable and somebody says the wrong thing and you get ticked off, right? But a lot of times when you get angry, it's to prep you for doing something that needs to be done, right? It helps to spur you towards attaining what we call the difficult good. And that's an interesting topic. We're going to just leave that aside. I just want to have this sort of noted that there is this difference. So where is a passion? Well, that is down here for Thomas. When we feel passions, this part, by the way, is also connected with the body, the physical corporeal body. When you get angry, what happens to your body? Do you undergo any changes? Yeah, your muscles get tense. Some people actually clench their jaw. Blood pressure rises. We talked about some of this last time. Face changes. Your body actually gets flooded by, Thomas didn't know this, but we know this now. Your body gets flooded by adrenaline. It affects different people differently. I get the shakes if I get really angry because of all the adrenaline going through me because my body's getting ready to fight somebody. What happens when you get depressed? Does that affect your body physically in any way? Get depressed enough, you'll get sick. They actually did studies recently, and there's been this whole thing of people dying of a broken heart, and the scientists were like, well, that's just silly romantic nonsense. If you actually undergo major stresses in your life, that can actually steer you towards dying. It's not going to be the one thing that decides it for you, like, oh, she broke up with me, fall over dead. But major trauma, that affects the body. So there's an interrelation between the body and the mind that's going on. When we feel an emotion, we don't feel, for example, our blood pressure rising in anger. We feel something psychological. And the effects of it are not just physical. Blood pressure doesn't make you say a mean thing to the person next to you, or shake your fist at the car ahead of you who's going 5 under the speed limit, or we could pick all sorts of examples, right? Similarly, when you feel love, insofar as it's a passion, it's in the sensitive appetite, and it's also affecting you to some degree bodily. So you don't actually tally up all the bodily responses. You feel the emotion itself. You act on that psychologically. What are behaviors that you typically do to people that you love?
Sometimes irrational.
Sure, that's a qualifier of them. We don't have to worry whether they're rational or irrational. What are you fall in love with somebody? What are some of the things you do? That's one kind of love of desire. What do you do?
Start to put what they want before what you want.
Okay, you actually first you got to find out what they want, right? Do you like this kind of music? And you find out that they do, and then you download well, you wouldn't download the MP3, right? You get them an iTunes gift card and send it and say, I'd like you to pick out this song from this group that I know you love, right? What about somebody you hate? Is there anything you typically do with people that you hate?
Kind of the same thing.
The same thing?
Yeah.
You send them an iTunes gift card?
Well, no, you find out.
You just say, screw you at the bottom of
I
it.
feel like if there's somebody you don't like, you somehow know all kinds of stuff about them also.
You know offensive stuff about them?
No, all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and that's probably why you don't like them,
Yeah.
right? If you really hate somebody, Aristotle says that hatred is wanting the other person not to exist because you realize them as a bad. We feel love towards the good, we feel hatred towards the bad. And actually for Thomas, in some parts we're not actually going to get to today, hatred comes out of love. Hatred is ultimately grounded on loving something and then feeling like other things are totally incompatible with it. You also love yourself, so you can feel some things are incompatible with your very being. Let's look now at what he actually says. He asks, is love in the concupiscible power? So is it part of this sensitive appetite? And he says some things that require a little bit of unpacking in order to really make sense. But once you actually do it, all these parts kind of fit together, all the things that he's talking about. So he says, love is something pertaining to the appetite, since good is the object of both. Wherefore, love differs according to the difference of appetites. What does he mean by appetite? Again, desire. Instead of the word appetite, substitute faculty of desire. All of you desire things. For example, you desire, how many of you ate breakfast so far? So half of you desire some breakfast, don't you? Those of you who ate breakfast, would you like some more breakfast maybe, or some coffee, or tea, juice? You have desires for that, right? You also have desires for going back to bed. You have desires for watching TV. You have desires for talking about basketball. You have desires for being friends with people. You have desires for making something of your life. Now we're starting to get to higher desires. You have desires for other people or beings, or however you want to look at it, for them to do certain things, for them not to do certain things. Your realm of desires is incredibly vast. Some of these desires come right from your nature. So like Thomas says, there's an appetite which arises from an apprehension existing not in the subject of the appetite, but in some other, in the object itself. And this is called the natural appetite. Natural things, which is us, plants, animals, stones even. What he says about rocks, desiring to fall, you could probably dismiss that because we don't believe that in science anymore. But plants and animals and bacteria and you, they seek what is suitable to them according to their nature. So what are some things that are suitable to us according to our nature, the kind of bodies that we have, the kind of beings that we have, that are not suitable, say, to jellyfish? Jellyfish live in the ocean. They don't have skeletons. They just kind of float around and eat things. Turns out they're actually becoming a big pest in a lot of areas because they can live in environments that a lot of other things can't, and they eat a lot of things that we need. Jellyfish's life is pretty basic. Eat, excrete, grow. Wake up the next day, I don't even know if they sleep. Eat some more, grow some more, excrete waste some more. Reproduce every once in a while. They don't even have to have sex to reproduce. Some jellyfish can make clones of themselves. There's all different varieties of this. What about us? How would that sort of life appeal to you? Every morning, wake up, eat something, go to the bathroom. What else did I say? Grow a bit, grow a little bit larger each day. Your brain is still growing inside of your skull. And that's it. Would that appeal? Would that satisfy you?
Some days.
Yeah. Usually when we're totally burnt out, and it's because we've been doing so much activity. But why do we do that activity in the first place? Because we desire that, because that's appropriate to us. As a matter of fact, even exercise. If you're out of shape, you don't really like to exercise, but it still feels good to do something. To just imagine that somebody said, okay, you can only lay in bed. That's all you can do. You'd want to get up and walk around. It would drive you nuts after a while. I spent an entire summer like that once when I was in high school because I had mono and didn't follow my doctor's orders. So then, the doctor imposed that regime on me. Suddenly you want to do a whole bunch of things. So we have this natural set of desires, natural love, for certain things. Jellyfish like to eat plankton. You probably wouldn't like plankton. You are attracted to all sorts of other kinds of food that's appropriate for you. We probably couldn't just eat raw plankton and digest it well. Think about deer. What do deer eat that we can't eat? They like corn. They like licking salt blocks and apples. You can take all those things. What can deer eat that you can't? They have different bacteria in their stomach. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cellulose. They can eat, woody things. Try it. See how well that works. So eat some sawdust. It's not going to work for you. We have different things appropriate to our different natures. So that's what he calls natural appetite. And where did we get this from? Thomas has an easy explanation. God just implanted it in each kind of creature that he made. That's the beginning point. Then he says there's another appetite arising from an apprehension in the subject of the appetite, but from necessity, not free will. This is in irrational animals, the sensitive appetite, which, he says, can have a certain measure of freedom in human beings, because we can choose to follow it or not. A dog really can't choose whether it's going to chase the deer or not, in any meaningful sense. You can restrain it by putting it on a leash, or telling it, no, bad dog, or something like that. But the dog's not making a free choice, and it's not obeying reason in itself by not chasing the deer. The dog sees the deer, the dog wants to get the deer. As a matter of fact, different breeds of dogs want to eat and kill different things. We have 2 dogs at home. One of them barks at birds. He's that kind of dog. Particularly hawks, and the hawks actually swing down and taunt him. When he's not barking at them, they'll come by and scream. The other dog couldn't care less, because that dog is a different kind of dog. It was bred originally for killing wild boar. So when she sees big things like deer, or when she's watching the TV and a bear comes on, because the dogs will actually notice the images on the TV, she'll go nuts, because all these instincts are kicking in. Again, sensitive appetite. It's part of what's appropriate to their nature. If a deer sees another deer or a cow and then wants to go attack it and eat it, there's something very wrong with that, right? That's not part of its nature. That's not part of its sort of sensitive appetite. We have a lot of different appetites. Think about the vast array of things that our senses take in that we enjoy. Some of them are actually bad for us. But they're based on originally some sort of sense of goodness. Think about food, for example. We've talked about this before. What are the 3 things that go into food that make it taste particularly good that you kind of have to watch the quantity of in our culture? You guys remember? I mentioned this a couple times. One of them is fat. Salt. You can put too much salt in things, but the right amount of salt really brings out taste. What's the other one? Sugar, yeah. Now, are any of these bad things by themselves? No. As a matter of fact, if you try to live on a diet with no fat, you'll basically destroy your body. Your body craves sugar because sugar is, in small quantities, something useful for it. Perhaps not quite so much refined sugar. It'd be better to have fruit sugars and milk sugars and things like that. Your body also needs salt. A good part of your body is actually salt, So you have to have a certain amount of that. And there's other minerals and things like that too, but those usually aren't the big problem. Not too many people are eating too much iron or things along those lines. Why do we desire these things? Because they're actually good for us. Can we go overboard with them? In our culture, yes, because we have this massive availability of them. And we actually put too much of them in food. But we desire them because in limited quantities, they're actually very good for us. They're actually necessary for us. Then we have another appetite, once we get to the higher level, which follows, he says, freely from an apprehension in the subject of the appetite. This is the rational or intellectual appetite, which we call will. And he says, in each of these appetites, the word love is used. So there's different kinds of love. It's given to the principal movement towards the end love. In natural love, it's based on what he calls connaturality, connaturalness, sort of an appropriateness of things to us. In the sensitive appetite or the will, he says this complacency in good is called sensitive love or intellectual or rational love. So love in the strictest sense as a passion belongs in the sensitive faculty, but it also belongs to our will. We do, to some extent, choose what we love. We have a much greater capacity to determine ourselves, to determine our desires. If you, for example, want to change one of your desires, you can do so through modifying your habits, and it's not some sensitive appetite that chooses that for you. It's your will actually deciding, hey, I got to quit chewing my nails, or I need to actually start exercising regularly, or you can pick all sorts of different things. So that gets us started. Then he starts asking, is love a passion? And here, he tells us about how love actually works. So love is a passion. That means that when we feel love, something in us, and we just talked about what those somethings in us, is the patient, is undergoing something else. So let's kind of sketch this out. You have you, and there's something in you, because it's not all of you, right? And then you have some sort of object. And this mysterious back and forth we call love. The object exerts an effect on you. You, in turn, want that object. You seek it out. You try to improve it. You do good things for it, depending on what kind of love it is that you're feeling. So, how does this work? He says, a natural agent produces a twofold effect on the patient. In the first place, it gives what he calls the form. Remember when we talked about Aristotle and the four causes? The formal cause is the structure. So objects give to us, classes of objects give to us certain structures of desire. Think about it. Here's a great example. When did you, maybe for some of you, you still value candy more, but for most of you, there was a point when puberty hit when you were suddenly less interested in candy, which you should be interested in because it's sweet and tastes great, and it's fun to eat, and it's associated with festive occasions like Halloween and Christmas, and getting a treat, right? When did you quit being so interested in candy and become more interested in other human beings and your desire for them, your attraction to them? I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12, maybe 14, I don't know, depends on the person and how nourished you are. Puberty can be offset if you don't get enough food. What happened then? Something imposed a different form on your appetites, a different structure. It's one reason why adolescents are different than children. That's a natural process that usually works. Sometimes there's cases where people, don't feel that. But there's many other things that could bring about new desires within you. How many of you had a class in high school or here at Marist where when you went into the class you were not interested in that topic, and you found yourself after that semester was over, maybe because of the professor, maybe because of the subject matter, maybe something inside of you changed, where you said, wow, I really enjoy this. I thought this was garbage. I would have never have taken this class if somebody hadn't pushed me into it, but now I really like this. I want to know more about this. How many of you had that experience? Only a few of you? Hopefully you'll have that experience here at Marist, because that's an important part of growth as an intellectual being. I'm sorry that the rest of you didn't have that sort of experience. It's unfortunate. Probably complain to your high school teachers. What's going on there? That same structure, the form, is being imposed on the desire. by the object. That allows you then to have a movement towards the object. Actually, what I should put here is not desire, but love. This movement, then, is the movement of desire. He says that the appetitable object, the thing that we can desire, imposes a kind of adaptation to itself. From this follows movement towards that object. It introduces itself into the intention of the thing desiring it. So he says the first change wrought in the appetite by the appetitable object is called love. This is nothing more than what he calls a complacency in that object. That's a hard term to make sense of. It means a being able to appreciate, to value, to see what's good in that object. Another trivial example. As kids, hopefully none of you like the taste of beer because it's bitter, and when you're like a little kid and your mom or dad says, "Bring me a can," and you taste it, you should actually have that reaction of, "I can't believe they drink this swill." As you get older, your tastes change, and that will become something that you could actually enjoy and desire. That's a sort of complacency in the object. You're able to appreciate it now. This is a very trivial example, right? Beer and candy, kind of low-order objects. Being able to appreciate what's going on in a classical symphony. And I'm not a good, judge myself of this sort of stuff. There's a few composers I like, and I know about them, and most others I, listen to the pretty music. But you could actually get to know what's going on in these sorts of things, and that would produce this complacency, this capacity to feel love, appreciation. Not just desire, but appreciation for the object. And then you can feel desire. Now, I want to hear a classical symphony. So he says there's a couple things going on with this. There's love, there's desire, and then what happens when we actually have the object? We have a new passion. Joy. Or pleasure. We find things pleasant. We have joy in things because they are, in a certain way, appropriate to us. Does it make sense? This is a very different way of talking about things, a very different way of analyzing things. So he says, it's evident love is a passion properly so called, accordingly as it's in the concupiscible faculty in a wider and extended sense as it is in the will. Then Thomas starts sort of switching things up, and he asks about a couple different terms. I'm going to erase a bit. And he says, is love the same thing as dilection? And in order to make sense of this, it helps to know a little bit of Latin. And here's what I want to say about this. Every language has multiple words for love. Multiple words for the kinds of feelings, the whole range, the whole spectrum of desires, feelings, affection that we have. Many of them can be quite nuanced. One of the problems that occurs is that it's not just based on language, it also depends on authors. Some authors may use some words in a certain sense, and then another author uses them in a different sense. Some people wanted to say that there's a difference between love in the sense of amorous love, like desire, and dilection. Other people, switched it around, and love is the one that's just kind of base, desirous, and dilection is something more elevated. Other people, made dilection lower. And so Thomas is dealing with kind of a mess. People calling some of the same things different words, and perhaps using the same word to describe different things. And what's his approach? He says, well, if we actually want to be serious about this, it's not just love amor, dilection, dilectio. We also have to think about charity and friendship, because these are words that are used for love too. And I'll give you the Latin for this too. Caritas, amicitia. You remember Cicero in his On Friendship said, amicitia, amor, they come from the same root, they're connected with each other. Friendship is really a kind of love. If we did this in French, if we did this in German, did this in Greek, it would be different words, but it's the same fundamental problem. How do you actually make sense of all these? One thing you could do would be to say, well, look, this is this, this is this, this is this. They're all different things. They all function differently from each other. So, when we do things like we say, well, there's really 3 or 4 kinds of love. There's agape and philia and storge and eros. And eros is when you're like attracted to somebody and you desire what you don't have. Storge is affection that you feel towards your parents or your children. And philia is based on some sort of common bond, and it's like friendship. And then agape is that self-giving love. And they're all totally different from each other, not connected with each other. That doesn't work, because it turns out they are actually connected with each other. That, for example, eros needs to be located within the realm of agape in order to really achieve what it's going to achieve. These things always turn out to have different connections. So Thomas takes a different tack. He says, this is a kind of love. This is also a kind of love. This is also a kind of love. Love encompasses all of these and also includes some other things too. So love is the broadest term, the most generic term. And these other things, then, what are they? Well, dilectio, his explanation here depends on some, playing around with Latin words, and that's probably not a good reason for you to accept his argument there, but we can reframe it in terms of something else. He says, dilection always involves choice. We encountered this earlier when we talked about the difference between natural love and love of choice. So that means that dilection is always going to involve will. It's what we commit ourselves to as free beings. So if I'm attracted to a person, that's, say eros or romantic love or something like that. If I choose to actually write letters to them and enjoy writing the letters to them, that would be dilectio. That's involving my will. Does that make sense to you? If I love somebody and I therefore love the box of chocolates that I'm going to get for them, and I love the money that I have to use, or the credit card, to pay for the chocolates, that would also appear to be this love of choice. It's in the will. It's not as foundational in certain respects. Charity, he says, charity is a certain kind of perfection of love. We use the word charity to describe some kinds of love when they are what they ought to be to the fullest extent. When you see this word perfection in Thomas, don't think perfect like perfectionism. Like these people who are totally neurotic about getting everything completely right. Some of you may have tendencies towards perfectionism. I know I have tendencies towards perfectionism. I think I actually made a video about it at one time because viewers were asking me about perfectionism. And perfectionism often leads to another problem, procrastination, right? Because you're a perfectionist, so you never get anything done. It doesn't mean that sense. We also tend to think of perfect as meaning like without any sort of flaws. He also doesn't mean that, or the greatest. What he means is when something is actually the fullest that it could be, when it's brought to its fruition, when it's completed, then it's perfect. So how should love be? Just take a sort of break from Thomas for an example. When you really love somebody, how should you behave? How should you feel towards them? Maybe you feel this towards somebody, maybe you don't. Maybe you'd like to have somebody feel it towards you. Maybe you experienced that. What goes into that? Think about people who've loved you. Some people have loved you because they've been attracted to you and they wanted something from you. That's not charity. Yeah.
Caring.
Okay, so caring is a big part. Caring for the other person. Caring is both a feeling and it's also an action, right? If I say I really care for you, but I don't help you out with anything, I probably don't. I'm deceiving myself. I'm lying to myself. I don't really care for you. What else? What else does love need or require? Yeah.
Devotion.
Devotion. Okay. What do you mean by? I'll get one sec. What do you mean by devotion? I want to follow this one out.
By being faithful to the other person and having only wanting their love or something.
Okay, so it's sort of commitment that zeroes in,
Yeah.
and it runs through one's life. So instead of say, going to watch the game, because I said I would do this over here and I care about this person, I'm going to go do this with them, even though I'm in some respects rather watch the game. What were you going to say?
Trust and honesty.
Those are important. Now here's something interesting to think about. If I love you, I should behave in a trustworthy, honest way towards you. Can I love you with a kind of perfect love if you're not trustworthy and honest? Can I love you despite your flaws?
Yeah.
Is that less perfect love or is that more perfect love?
It could technically be more perfect love.
Yeah, that's the way Thomas thinks of it. This self-giving love that's called agape is what gets translated as charity in Latin. And so it would be greater to love without expecting something in return. Hoping for something in return. If I love you and I treat you well and I'm honest with you because you deserve that, and you don't act that way towards me, I can still hope that you would act that way towards me, right? And desire that for you, because it would be a good thing for you, not just for me, but a good thing for you. That's what goes into charity. That's what he means by perfection of love. It was kind of a long digression, but I hope that helps you understand that term. Friendship. He says friendship is a little bit different than these other things, because this seems to be more in the realm of choice, or the perfection of affection and action. And friendship is more like a habit. Not quite a habit, but more like a habit, something developed over time. He doesn't say this in these terms, but friendship is more like a continued relationship with reciprocity, isn't it? And that's part of love, but it's not all of love. Now, he immediately goes on and then starts asking about friendship. And he introduces a distinction that's going to be very important through the rest of these articles between love, and sometimes you'll see it written concupiscence. There's an English term coming from the Latin concupiscentia, which means essentially desire, right? So, in older versions you often see, like in the text that you have, love of concupiscence, but it really means a kind of desire. And then there's love of friendship. And how are these different? Well, can you be friends with your iPhone?
Some people are.
Yeah.
In what sense are they friends with their iPhone?
Like Siri.
Yeah, I mean, let's make it really specific. Can you be friends with Siri? Forget the fact that Siri doesn't actually know very much and often suggests things that are useless. Because some of your friends probably are like that, right? You know, some people are like that. We still like them. We like Siri, I suppose, because she's useful. Have you guys ever seen I think it's on College Humor, where Siri gets caught in between a man and a woman, and they're having a big argument. I think they're probably married, and Siri like tries to extricate herself from that. It's a very uncomfortable situation for Siri, but really Siri doesn't get uncomfortable in real life. You can imagine a relationship with Siri, right? Can you really have a relationship with Siri as a person? Why not?
Because she like is only what you make her.
Exactly. We invest our desires. What you have for Siri, if you really love Siri, I don't know if any of you do, but if you really love Siri, you have a love of desire towards Siri. You don't actually have a love of friendship. That can only be felt towards persons. Or I suppose it might be able to be felt towards animals in a certain respect. Because, like he says, we're said to love certain things because we desire them. The man loves wine. Why? What are the different reasons people love wine? It's sweet, so you want the sweetness from the wine. I think more people love wine because it helps get you drunk. And you know, people enjoy that. And you know, if you can get the same, this is why people actually buy cheap stuff rather than expensive stuff, because it gets you drunker quicker, right? And you don't have to pay as much. On the other hand, if what you really want out of the wine is the taste, and you actually have a refined palate, I don't. I can be happy with a $10 bottle of wine. Then you buy the expensive wine because you can appreciate that. But you're just appreciating the taste. You're not actually like appreciating the wine for itself. If somebody were to insult the wine, you probably should not get angry the way you should if somebody insults your friend or your family member. If you do, there's something kind of weird going on there with you and that wine. So that's love of desire, like he says. He says, as the philosopher, that's Aristotle says, to love is to wish good to somebody. Do we wish good to bottles of wine or to other things we desire for their own sake? I mean, we want the bottle of wine to keep. So what do you do with a bottle of wine to make sure that it doesn't, get all screwed up? Don't throw it around the room.
Like cork it.
Oh, if you pour some out, yeah, so it doesn't oxidize. Of course, if you want the wine to be at its best, there's like a whole procedure of like pouring it out. And it's called decanting, right? It's got to have some oxygen into it, and it has to, they say, open up and breathe. We have all these metaphors for it. If you're going to keep it for a while, store it in a cool place that's fairly dark. Don't just like pour it into a bunch of glasses and leave it out on the counter for weeks on end, because then you're going to have vinegar or something worse. But do you really wish good to the bottle of wine for its own sake? You may take care of it, but you take care of it because you want something from it, because you have desires. Right? What's the kind of food that you really, some of you really love? Anything that you have a great affection for? Not just it tastes great, but you really appreciate this kind of food. Yeah.
Like homegrown, like produce.
Okay, that's a good example. What makes homegrown, let's say tomatoes, right? Because that's something we can all relate to pretty easily, unless you're allergic to tomatoes. What makes that different than the store-bought stuff?
You appreciate it more because it's small, like homegrown. There's no chemicals.
It tastes better too, right?
It tastes better.
There's actually a richness of taste in these heirloom products and smaller growth products that you can't find in the tomatoes that are really shipped from God knows where, what. That's why you pay more for them. Now, you can feel love and desire towards those tomatoes. You want those tomatoes to last, to do well. You actually promote, local gardening or something like that. But you're not doing it because tomatoes by themselves are worthy of love, the way your friends could be, the way a person could be. You don't wish good to tomatoes for the sake of those tomatoes. So, like he says, that which is loved with the love of friendship is loved simply and for itself. When you're really feeling friendship, the love of friendship towards somebody, and that could mean what Thomas is calling charity, you love that person for who they are. You love that thing for what it is. I suppose this could extend to animals too. Perhaps there's a scale. I don't know that you could love a plant necessarily for what it is. Plants don't really do much. I'm not even sure whether Thomas would go along with the animal thing, but I'm willing to entertain that possibility. That which is loved with the love of concupiscence is loved not simply and for itself, but for something else, because we want to get something out of it. Now think about when you have a romantic relationship with a person. You're attracted to them. What are you attracted to? Maybe it could be the opportunities that they open up for you. People are attracted to money, to power. Those things actually do function as aphrodisiacs. Why? Because, you love having nice things. So if you get involved with somebody who buys you a lot of nice things, that works out really nice for you, doesn't it? Maybe they get something they like in the process, like the enjoyment of your company. You do favors for them. Who knows, right? That's still love of concupiscence. You get attracted to somebody and you just want to sleep with them. You just want to have sex with them. Could somebody else substitute for that? Somebody who more or less looked the same as them? Here'd be an interesting way to think about this. You're attracted to somebody, you want to have sex with them, they don't want to be involved with you in the same way. They're not into the same sort of things that you are. They have stronger limits or whatever it is that way. And now imagine that there were to be a clone of them or an identical twin or somebody like that. And this identical twin is like them in every respect, but has much more relaxed mores when it comes to sexual involvement. You can't get to whatever base it is that you want to get to with this person, but this person you can. Do you say, well, they're pretty much the same, so I'm going to go with this one over here? If you do, what you feel is love of concupiscence or desire. If, on the other hand, you say, no, I really want to get to know this person. I still want to have sex with them, because that's part of what it is, when you feel desire and romantic love and all that. But I don't want to replace them with somebody. I actually appreciate them. I want to get to know who they are and develop intimacy. Then you're feeling love of friendship. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think that's one that's easy to relate to. Now, he goes on. I'm going to skip over the question of whether good is the only cause of love, because we've already covered a lot of that, and we don't have that much time. I want to talk about these other articles where he asks about knowledge and likeness. I'm going to actually do these a little bit out of order, because the knowledge one is really interesting, so I want to close with that. So this is Article 3 of question 27. Whether likeness is a cause of love. Remember, friendship was based on likeness? So, is likeness really a cause of love? Thomas says there's two kinds of likeness. There's where it's actual. The two things that are alike actually have the same property. They have the same quality. So, what's some properties or qualities that you have? You're all students. That's a likeness between you. You're not potentially students. You actually are students here at Marist, right? If we did it on the basis of gender, really about, I'd say, 50, it's probably a little bit more like 55% of you are female, 45% of you are male. That's a quality you share in common. You're not like potentially male. Those of you who are men are actually men, right? You were, I suppose, potentially that a long, long time ago. Those of you who are women are actually women. You have some sort of thing in common. You're young, as opposed to me, who's middle-aged. Right? This is where we get to something interesting. You're potentially middle-aged. Someday you will be middle-aged. Another possibility of likeness is where one part is actual and the other part is merely potential. That can be a type of likeness as well. I know a lot about philosophy and quite a bit about history and quite a bit about literature. When it comes to the humanities, I'm fairly well-rounded. And I appreciate the sort of things that I study. And that is something that's potentially yours. And as a matter of fact, some of you have already shown me through the way in which you write that you're on the way towards that. You're not just like it's all bare potential. You've already developed some of that, and you're moving towards it. You're not where I am because I'm a lot older than you. And hopefully by the time you're my age, you'll be way beyond where I am. Because I did a lot of detours and screwed around a lot. And you guys are pretty motivated, right? But potentially, if it comes down to studying Aristotle, I love Aristotle. I study Aristotle on my own because I find some great benefit in doing so. And I have something like what you could call love of friendship towards Aristotle. It's not just getting something out of him. And I'm not in it for the big bucks, because Aristotle scholars don't make a lot of money. You could do that. Any one of you could. That's a potential for you. Most of you are in better shape than I am. You are actually in good shape. I am potentially in good shape. I'm not in good shape now, but if I actually watched my diet and worked out and did the cardio and the weight training, I could be in good shape. I could have the quality that you have. So, is this something that can cause love or friendship? Thomas says the first kind of likeness does cause friendship or well-being. In a lot of cases, when people have something in common, that's a basis for them to actually share with each other. It can go wrong, right? He's got that discussion in there. If there's certain goods that we both are attracted to and we can't both enjoy them, then we can feel, hatred or rivalry towards each other because of sharing the same quality. For example, he says, if somebody else's likeness to me, arising by the participation in the same desire, hinders me from gaining the good that I love, you become hateful to me. Not because you're like me, though, but because you hinder me, because I see you as an obstacle. So, for example, two women are in love with the same man. They're friends with each other, and part of that friendship is on the basis of them being women. But now they're rivals for the same person's affection, and they can't both enjoy that person's affection. So the likeness looks like it's causing the problem. Really what's causing the problem is the fact that each of the ones sees the other as hindering them, as blocking them from what it is that they desire. You see the difference there? What about this other type, this actual and potential? He says that, here we go, the second kind of likeness causes love of concupiscence, or friendship founded on usefulness or pleasure. Whatever is in potentiality has the desire for its act and takes the pleasure in its realization. If you actually explore Aristotle and come to realize the potential that you have for learning something that he has to offer you, that's actually quite pleasurable. Probably when you guys read Aristotle earlier, you didn't really feel that blessing, but you'd have to do a bit more work on that. You could study with me some more and learn about Aristotle and come to enjoy that, and we could actually have a love of friendship. Right now, if you wanted that from me, that would be love of desire. You want to get something from me, bless you, that object. And it's based on the potential that you have. He gives some examples. The illiberal man loves the man who is liberal. That means the stingy person loves the person who's generous. Why? Because they get something from them. And they also recognize in them what they're missing, what they're lacking. He says, because we have certain principles in our reason, in force of which principles, the man who is not virtuous loves the virtuous man, as being in conformity to his own natural reason. When we see good people who we want to hang out with, and we're motivated by this love of desire to do that because we're going to get something out of them, we're also at the same time recognizing what is actual in them, which is only potential in us, that which we should have but don't actually have. That's why we want to hang out with them. He has another really interesting thing where he talks about this can, also involve recognition of each other's talents. He's got the example of a good singer can love a good writer because he recognizes a certain kind of proportion, a certain analogy between what he has. When we can appreciate each other, what the other person has in them. Like, for example, I know a lot of chefs. I'm not a chef. But, my wife, through her connections, I know a lot of chefs. And they can make some really, really good meals. And I can appreciate that. And I can hang out with them because I love a desire to have, nice food, because I like to eat. And I like things that taste great. And on the basis of my, mastery of my crafts, I can understand and appreciate what's going on in the mastery of their crafts. Because I had to study for so long and apply myself to learn the things that I learned, I can better appreciate just how much they had to apprentice and learn. That's what Thomas is talking about there with that example. Here we go. Is knowledge a cause of love? Thomas is raising a really interesting problem here. And this is what we're going to sort of finish by thinking about. Do you have to know something before you can love it? Or does love motivate you to know it? Let's make it as stark as we can. How many of you have dated anybody at any given time? Okay, now why did you date them? What do we mean by dating, actually? Some people start sleeping with each other and they say, we're dating. That's probably not what you mean, right? It involved going out on actual dates? I hope. Okay, why do you go on dates with somebody? There's more than one reason, too. I'm not just looking for the right answer. Why do you go on dates with people?
So you learn more about that person?
That should be part of it.
Decide whether you like spending time with them or not?
It's sort of like a trial, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's often, courtship played the same role. You're actually getting to know the person. Now, but why would you date them in the first place if you're not already attracted to them, if you don't already feel love towards them? It's like a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? But this is the way it actually does work. You don't have to have perfect knowledge in order to love something. Because perfect knowledge is pretty hard to come by. And it's even harder to come by for human beings than it is for things about like coffee. You could break down this coffee and tell me exactly what's in it and why it affects my taste the way it does. It's pretty simple stuff. Or, this tie. Do you like the tie? Do you not like the tie? Your reasons for that, one way or the other, are going to be pretty simple, aren't they? And it doesn't take long to get to know the tie. There's not much here. You can feel it. And Oh, it's got that texture. Now I know something more about it, right? But now think about a person. You don't even know yourself. I don't even know myself in all of the nooks and crannies. I'm often still surprised by some of the stuff that I say and do, and I'm 43 years old. And do you know another person completely? Absolutely not. I mean, even if you spent all your time just following somebody around, which would be kind of creepy, and just chronicling, imagine a camera, and now you don't have to you take something so you don't have to sleep. While they're sleeping, you just watch the footage, getting to know them. It still wouldn't work. There'd still be things you miss. I wonder why they're doing that thing. I know that they are doing that. I don't understand why they're doing it. Thomas's point is that he says, for the perfection of love, all is required is that a thing be loved according as it is known in itself. A thing can be loved perfectly. This is a very important point. A thing can be loved in the degree that we're capable of loving it. Human beings much more than say, coffee cups or iPhones. A thing can be loved perfectly without knowing it perfectly. The other thing that he says in here that's really interesting is, well, how do you actually figure out that something is good? To love something is to know the good about it and to respond to that goodness in it. How do we get to know that? And he says, well, there's 3 ways, these are not exhaustive, but these are covering a lot, by which we come to know that something is good when we didn't know it before. We can have sort of a general idea of it, kind of a confused idea. Like you knew that going to college is a good idea, right? You didn't know exactly why, and even now, would any of you be willing to say you fully understand why going to college is a good thing at this point, or are you still kind of exploring that? Is the verdict still out? You know?
Yeah.
No, like
That's,
that's.
but you're not a freshman though, right? You've been doing it longer. What were you gonna say?
So it's like still out. Like people tell you it's great, but like you don't really reap the benefits till it's over.
You have a general idea, and the specifics aren't completely filled in yet, right? So that's one way. Another way you learn that something is good is by observing its effects. Somebody treats you well. You can assume that that person is actually a good person that you might be able to develop a love of friendship with, a genuine appreciation for them. The other thing that he says that's really interesting is by hearing something praised. We learn what is good, not just from our own experience, but we're social beings. We learn about what is good from other people telling us about their experience, or perhaps even telling us about somebody else's experience, second, third, fourth hand. So that's what we'll leave off with.